Welcome to the Girl Crush podcast with me, Donna Pesci. I created this podcast to encourage, inspire, and empower women to dream big and live with purpose, passion, and joy. I'm fortunate enough to have interesting, authentic, and sometimes really funny conversations with amazing women who are just crushing it at life. You'll meet entrepreneurs, CEOs, healers, creators, artists, mystics, and moms. We'll talk about everything from the decisions that shape our lives to the moments that make us laugh out loud. We'll chat, we'll examine, we'll even gossip a little. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Today, we are talking to Lizzi Cutler. Lizzi is a healing arts trainer and modern mystic whose private energy clearing practice has her on the speed dials of everyone from CEOs to celebrities. But Lizzi says her favorite clients are everyday people that are committed to personal growth and expansion. She uses her training in meditation and coaching to help people change the way they respond to stress. She helps people deal with or remove limiting beliefs that we carry in our DNA and helps people to feel liberated so they can find the joy in an abundant life. Thank you so much for being here, Lizzi. I am a past student of yours, as you probably, or maybe don't remember because it was a while ago, back in my Chicago days. But I used to take your meditation trainings at Soho House in Chicago. And it was a long time ago, but it was really my first introduction into meditation. So
That?
yeah, it was
Cool.
my first introduction. And it was also the first time that I actually really felt like I was doing it right. I don't know that there's ever like a right way to do it, but there was something about being in a room with you and with other people and just kind of, feeling everyone else's energy that I was like, oh, okay, like I get it now. Like I had
Yeah.
heard of meditation and I knew it was helping people. But that was really kind of my first introduction to it. So I want to say thank you for that because I use meditation all the time now. It's really something that I do almost daily. So I
Amazing.
thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. And I do remember you. Um, it was a lot of years ago when I was a full-time yoga and meditation teacher, which feels like many, many moons ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was such a cool practice that we had where a lot of people would really join together to learn meditation. And we were just trying a bunch of different techniques together and working our way through.
It was great. And I remember recording some of the meditations and using them, at home. And
Yeah.
they were so great. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've been a fan for a long time.
That
So
was literally in the day when I would record it on my phone on a voice memo and then pass my phone around with like the notes app open and have you guys write in your email.
yes, that
Yeah.
is exactly how we did it. That is
That was my
exactly how we
very
did it.
technical way of getting everyone's email addresses.
Oh, wow. That kind of makes me feel a little old. That's
Yeah.
right. That is what we did.
Well, it's more about how tech savvy I was not. Like, had someone said post it on YouTube and give everybody a link, that would have been way easier. But, we live and we learn.
right, right. Exactly. We're always learning.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into anything, can you just give me a little bit, like, I know a little bit of your background, but I would love to know kind of how you got into this business.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to try to do this in like 3 minutes or less.
Okay.
So I had a couple different corporate-ish jobs, like what I call normal people jobs, and in my 20s. And I really wanted to teach yoga, but I couldn't afford to stop working to do a training, nor could I really fathom spending, I think it was a couple grand at least to do a yoga training. I also thought, and I had teachers saying, why don't you do a teacher training? And I kept saying, because I can't do a handstand in the middle of the room.
Mm,
And I fully believed that in order to be a yoga teacher, you had to perfect most of the poses, if not all. And I wasn't there yet. And then I was dating the guy that I would end up marrying and later divorcing. And his job sent him to Tokyo. And I ended up moving out there. And when I moved out there to be with him, there was a yoga training that was in English. And I had no idea what, like we're all used to, like, is it Ashtanga, is it Hatha? Iyengar, what style.
Mhm.
I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that they were going to speak English. So I signed up for the training. I went out there and I quickly learned it was really heavily focused on meditation, which was super cool. But it was all about the whole point of doing these yoga poses is so that your body can comfortably sit and meditate. So I learned a
Oh,
lot about meditation and I learned a lot about power yoga, which I was obsessed with before I went out there and how where that came from and kind of the whole history of it. And then when we moved back to Chicago, I was teaching yoga and meditation. And as I was meditating more and more and more, I started feeling energy more and more. And I had always loved going to psychics and tarot readers and astrologers and all the, what we might call the woo woo. And always wanted to be one of those people that had one of those gifts. And once I was meditating, it really started turning on. And
right.
then years later, after meditating and teaching corporate meditation and that sort of being my main company and my business, I realized that there was something happening energetically. And I had three different psychics that I had gone to say, there's something about your hands. You have to do a Reiki training. And I was like, all right, the third person tells you, you tend to listen.
Mhm.
And in the Reiki training, I liked it, but I wasn't feeling anything. And with all due respect and honor to Reiki, it just wasn't my thing. But as I was practicing it, I would get images in my head. So if my hands were up by someone's head, I would start seeing flashes of things. And it's not like my eyes were open and I would see it. But if I closed my eyes, if you closed your eyes and I said to you, picture a pink elephant, that's how I picture images that come through for people.
Wow.
And I didn't have anything to lose. So I just started saying it out loud of whatever I was seeing. And then realizing the person I was working on had some correlation to what I was seeing. So I was like, oh boy, we're working with something here.
Wow.
And I started going to different intuitives and psychics and healers and people to kind of say, like, what's this thing? And then over the course of probably 3 to 5 years, this was so I got divorced in like 2013, 14. It was final. From that point, on for like the next 3 or 4 years, it was like this amazing whirlwind of healers and trainers and trainings and different modalities and trying everything that I could really and sort of picking up pieces and parts of each technique to
Mhm.
kind of figure out what worked for me. And I tend to be a little bit of a defiant person. So when someone tells me I have to do something, I want to do the opposite and I get kind of bitchy and sassy. And so I was really more about like, don't tell me the steps that I have to take in order for this to work. Offer it to me. I'll see what works for me. And then I'm going to figure out my own thing. And that was really what this has become was yes, I'm intuitive and I would practice like, I would say, Donna, do you know anyone who would be open to a session? I just want to practice. Give me their first name and their phone number so that I know I can't cheat. Right. I couldn't possibly look it up on Facebook. I couldn't possibly know it because we had a conversation about it. And I would just start talking and figure out how my gift was going to work. And that's the one thing that I recommend to anyone who's like feeling like they have a gift, or I work with a lot of people who their gift is coming online. And the one thing I always say is let go of what the steps are, right? Let go of what the rules are. You have to find your own way in this. And once I let go and let myself do that, things really started moving and shaking. So
Well,
now,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
go ahead.
It feels like, that kind of like a gift like that shouldn't really have rules or boundaries, right? It would
Yeah.
be something that's kind of different for everybody.
Yeah. Ideally. But I think in a lot of, especially in like, even in the yoga training, right? There were a lot of studios that would say, like, we would love to hire you. Here's the class you need to teach. And I was like, but I can't. I don't want to do that. Right. Or like,
Yeah.
here's how meditation needs to go. First, you do this, then you do this. It's like, or we close our eyes and I'll like just let it come through me as
Yeah.
I'm teaching, right? I'll know what the room needs just by being in the room. So I'm actually just putting this together, but I was a theater major and I sort of take like an improv approach to showing up and understanding what does the client in front of me need? What does the group need? and then taking it from there, which made me a little bit nervous in each session of like, I mean, I have things that I can fall back on if I need to, but really, if I have the trust and I have the faith, the right information always comes through.
I was going to ask you that, like when this first started kind of coming to you and you first started understanding that this was a gift that you had, was it scary at all? If that were me, I would be nervous that I was granted something, that maybe not everybody has, that everybody doesn't have, obviously. And am I am I doing the what I'm supposed to be doing?
So, two things. Number one, I think everybody does have it. I
You
think
do.
that,
Okay.
yeah, I think that what I'm doing, and I can't speak to other people and their gifts. And so I don't want to take any credit away from anybody else. But for me personally, I feel like what I'm doing is I'm reading the energy that's in front of me. And it's so subtle and so slight that we're so used to just skipping over it. And I'm just creating space and giving words to what somebody has been feeling their whole life and vibrating on their whole life, thereby creating their reality. And by giving words to it, it's like I'm exposing what your conscious brain can't see of what your subconscious brain is telling you.
Okay.
And by shedding light on what the subconscious is thinking, it automatically shifts. And most of our subconscious programming happens when we're small people. So, like between six ish and nine ish. And by giving words to that, then we're able to speak it, then we're able to recognize it, and it automatically starts changing. It's like the Brene Brown thing of shame can't live once it's spoken.
Yeah.
So I do think that we all have it because you can walk in a room with someone's back to you and you can feel if there's a weird vibe in the room. Like we've all said, oh my God, I walked into this party. It was the weirdest vibe ever. Right.
Yeah.
You feel it instantly. So I do think we all have it. I think that what I've done or what I'm doing in sessions is getting quiet enough to put words to it so that then it can have a different impact and it can change. And as far as being scared, um, that word has a lot of context to it, I think. So there's scared in the sense that sometimes people say to me, well, what if I don't want the info that comes through? Right. I'm scared of like ghosts and goblins coming through. And for some reason, I've never been scared of that. And maybe I should have been a little bit more,
Mhm.
but I've never thought, I've just never thought that like a dark entity was going to get me. Right. I've had things come in where I'm like, get off of me. What are you thinking? What are you doing? Where are my guys? Come protect me, clear that off. Right. And like, I deal with it. Or I have friends that I go to where I'm like, is something attacking me? Is something on me? And they'll say, yeah, 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 I see it. I got it. I cleared it. So there's the fear of that. And I do have a lot of friends that will say to me, I'm afraid to do a session with you because I'm afraid of what you're going to say. And to those people, I say, it's your highest self that's communicating with me. Your highest self isn't going to want you to know anything that isn't going to serve your highest good. So I'm not going to hear like your dog's about to get hit by a car, brace yourself. That's not going to help anybody,
Mhm. Right.
right? We might get info like be more mindful and put your phone away when you're walking and be present and look at the flowers because that's going to get your head up so you're not going to have that instance. But I'm not going to get any information that, like, oh, be careful because this is what's coming to you. I never have. I hope I don't,
Mhm.
right? That's not the way that I want to be working and being of service. So I don't feel scared in that way. I do probably 80% of the time, it's way better now, but certainly in the beginning, I would get scared that nothing would come through, right?
Okay.
Like, what if I get on the phone and I have stage fright? Right? Like, what if there's no info that comes in? And I was like, I would always talk myself off the ledge. Like, all right, if that happened, I'll refund their money, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, there's nothing, this isn't life or death. There's nothing serious happening here. I'm either going to help someone or not, but I'm not going to hurt anybody.
Right. And I feel like also you have to be open to that, meaning the person on the other end, the person that
Yeah.
is wanting to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like sometimes people say that they want to hear things or, they'll they'll engage with you, but they don't necessarily really believe it. And I think I think we're going to talk a lot about like beliefs and your mindset and um how that affects everything else in life. But I do think that maybe if there is that instance, like maybe sometimes people are closed off and don't want that, don't really believe it.
I call that the dancing monkey impact. Like if somebody, first of all, most people aren't going to pay to prove me wrong. So
True.
that's dealt with. The annoying thing is when I'm out, whether it's like at dinner with friends or at a bar or whatever, and someone will say, "Yeah, right, prove it. What's my grandpa's name?" Right? Like, dance for me, prove it. That gets pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
Where like, look, if it were going to help you in the session for you to hear something specific like that, it could come through.
Right.
But that's not what I'm here for. And that's not
Right.
going to help you in any way. So if you're here to prove me wrong, we're not a good fit. And I'm 100% fine with that. I learned that a long time ago. I don't need to be here for everybody. So I know that the people that are coming to me are coming to me because we're a good match. We're going to learn from each other. It's going to elevate both of us. And it's in a really clear, pure intention.
So when you work with clients, is there a combination of things that you're doing? Do you have a conversation before about, well, I'm sure you do, about what it is that the session is going to be? Because I know that you right now you kind of define your work as the way that you change the way people respond to stress. I've seen, some of your videos and things like that. And I think, that's just such a powerful thing because we all have stress in our
Yeah.
lives and everyone deals with it in different ways. And some people don't deal with it very well. So I think, I'm just wondering, do people come to you like specifically for that? And then maybe when you're working with them, other things will come to you, or, how does
Yeah.
that work?
So most people come to me feeling stuck, some version of stuckness. Either my career feels stuck or I've checked all the boxes. I have a decent job, a good marriage, a nice family, a good home, and it doesn't feel like anything. Or the Sunday blues are so loud, but I can't quit my job because I have a mortgage that I need to pay. So please don't tell me that in order to feel happy or not feel stressed, I have to stop being a lawyer because that's not an option. And in those types of settings, I like to start with what I call an energy alignment, where clearly something is off in your energy. So this is all based on law of attraction. So we kind of have to start at the basic foundation of the belief that we create what we are vibrating, we are attracting in what we're already vibrating.
Mhm.
So if I believe that work has to be really hard in order to earn a good living, I'm going to keep seeing that play out. Or if I believe that all men are cheaters, I'm going to keep playing that scenario out. Whatever it is that I believe, I'm vibrating on that frequency, and that's what's going to be drawn in. So when someone first comes to me, I actually just ask you, and this is all on Zoom. So I'm never in person with people because I like for you to be in your bed comfy and I'm on my couch comfy, and everyone is more open that way.
Mm.
Um, So I just go through and kind of, I call it an alignment where I can feel and see and sense what's out of alignment vibrationally and physically, and then connect to the emotional piece behind it. So our soul only knows two ways to communicate with us, it's through our physical and our emotional feelings. So when we're comfortable, we don't really pay attention. But when we are uncomfortable or something feels off, that's when we start asking questions of what can I shift? What can I change? And that's where I come in. So I'm able to sense it, put words to it, and then I ask specific info on how do we change this? Either can I do it, where I'll like, it's almost like I'm an energetic cleaning lady. Like I'm pulling old jeans out of the back of your closet. Like we need space here and this shit's got to go. So sometimes I'm doing it, but a lot of times while I'm doing it, I'm saying to whoever I'm working on, okay, we need you to start paying attention to when you go into this headspace and shift it and stop stop engaging in this way with this family member because you're dragging both of you down. Or here's how to change your mindset around that thing so that it's not so tight and constrictive. And that alone will shift their energy and make their conscious mind more aware of what their subconscious mind is telling them, which again automatically creates a shift. So that's the energy alignment. Do you have any questions on that before I keep going?
I no, go ahead.
Okay.
Keep going.
And then if people choose to, then we go into what are called energy edits. And in those sessions, it's a lot of intuitive work, but it's 2 hours on Zoom where I'm muscle testing. So your highest self is guiding me to figure out what are the specific fears, beliefs, doubts, programs that were put in when you were a little person, that 6 to 9 ish, because those are the programs that are creating your reality. So it's either work has to be really hard, or if I'm super successful, everybody's going to have a handout. So as we start making more and more money, we start sort of self sabotaging to bring ourselves back down because it doesn't feel safe, or things around love, right? It's all the highlight reel. So most of us are most concerned with our career, our love life, our physical health, our
Mhm.
emotional health, our family. So by changing what those old beliefs and old programs were, it's like we're upgrading your software because intellectually, of course, it's safe for me to make more money. I know how to say no. I know how to give where I want to give. I know how to love where I want to love. But your vibration is still running like that 7-year-old belief. So,
So it almost sounds like therapy in a way. I mean, it's very it feels like it's very kind of closely related to therapy. What would you say the differences are between what you do and working with a therapist?
so I don't think that this replaces therapy. And I love my therapist. My therapist got me through my divorce and helped me understand my childhood, the players, in Yiddish, they would say the Mishigas, like the crazy that was going on in my family unit. And
Which we all have.
we all have, right? Like that's just the human experience. The challenge for me was after all those years of therapy, I felt like I was just going and like checking in with a friend because I loved my therapist so much. And nothing was really changing. Like I still loved a narcissist. I still wasn't dating people that were appropriate to be dating. I still wasn't dating men that were available. Right. So the same stuff was still happening. I just understood it. And I was just watching myself go into the red flags. What the energy edits and the energy work did was actually change the trigger. So the feeling of not enoughness that I had from being 7 years old, of like, this is what I deserve. So this is who I should be attracted to because it feels so comfortable. Or feeling, we all have stuff with our parents. It's usually a lot about our parents, but kind of getting into like my mom doesn't trigger me anymore as much and I recover so much faster. Or when I get panicked about not having enough money or not having enough love, I'm only in that conversation for like 3 to 5 minutes. And then I can walk myself out of it instead of that 2 week, every time I'm in the shower, I'm having the fake conversations and the fights and really spinning out about things. So the triggers still trigger, but the recovery is faster. And to me, with therapy, it was amazing at highlighting it and understanding it. I just didn't experience a shift from it.
So you're showing people the tools to do you can't make those triggers go away. You can't change people's families, you can't change people's work lives and take their stress away, but what you can do is change the way that they actually respond to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because when you think about like the lawyer is kind of the easiest example, the stress comes in when it feels like every other lawyer can do it better, can do it faster, is doing it smarter and more efficiently, and you're scrambling. And that's the 7-year-old feeling like I'm not quite smart enough because some jerk first grade teacher told me I wasn't trying hard enough. But you have completely forgotten about that story from first grade.
but
And
it's
then
so
by
everything.
uncovering it, yeah. So if you
Yeah.
think about not touching the hot stove, like that moment of being called out in class or feeling dumb or feeling humiliated, our little person brain says, that was the worst thing I've ever felt. I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. Let's do everything we can to prevent that from ever happening again. I'm going to set up an alarm. So anytime you're getting close to tripping that wire, I'm going to let you know to panic and retreat, which is really smart for a 7-year-old. But that trigger is still firing at 43, at 53, at 63 because it was never dissembled. Right. So that's what this
And
work is doing.
we may not even remember that that happened is what you're saying. It's just
Most
something
of
that
us
kind
don't.
of like is there and we don't
Most of the
know, we
time,
don't remember it.
100%. Yeah. So most of the time in these sessions with people, there's a moment of, holy shit, there was these girls in fifth grade that told me they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And like as an adult, I'm looking back like, who cares? Stuff happens. But as a
Right.
kid, that feels like death. Right. So the idea of being humiliated, that's why we stop speaking up. That's why we stop having a voice. That's why we stop having boundaries because it feels safer because we're still operating on that old system.
Yeah. That's so interesting because it's so much easier to believe the kind of like the bad, the bad things and that we can't handle things when, when we were younger. We're hearing those things and we're like, yeah, I can't handle that again.
Right.
But you're saying we're internalizing those things and not realizing that they're still affecting us when we're adults.
Yeah. So if you think about anxiety is a fear of something happening, right? It's always a fear of the
Mhm.
future. And that fear is there because there was some version of it from when you were little. And you're assuming it's going to be just as bad now. So you're triggering on the fear. You're sending out that fear response, that fight, flight, freeze based on something that may or may not happen, thinking I'm preparing myself for this. I'm doing a really good job at getting myself ready for this thing to hit the fan. And when it does, I'm going to be okay because I'm preparing. When in reality, you have such new tools, right? Like you're not that 7-year-old who had no control over anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. So I think that kind of goes along with why we have probably limiting beliefs
Yeah.
in things that we want to do with our lives. I think, limiting beliefs is something that I think everyone has at certain times in their lives.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you sometimes you don't know where they came from. It's just like easier to believe that you can't do it for some reason rather than you can do it.
Well, and 100% of those limiting beliefs come from when we're little people. They're programmed in at a very young age when we don't know how to discern fact from fiction. And it's really common for adults to say things like, if you don't study hard and you don't practice, you're never going to be good at that thing. Or another like obvious one is, well, just wait for the other shoe to drop, right? Or don't let the rug get pulled out from under you. Careful. Don't jinx yourself, right? So when things get good, those programs start coming in of like, well, nobody gets everything that they want. No one has the perfect life. You
Right.
can't have everything, which, like, that's not a fact. But as a 7-year-old, I don't know all the facts of the universe. I trust that my
Right.
mom and dad and the people on TV and my teachers and my friends' parents know. They know more than I do. So, and we never really know what's going to stick. So, like,
Right.
wait for the other shoe to drop might fly right over your head. But no one likes a mouthy girl might stick right in my chest. And then every time I want to speak up, that little clamp is there, like, "Duh, duh, don't forget, kids are meant to be seen and not heard." Right.
Gosh,
So, like,
that's so crazy. As you're saying that, I'm kind of like having a realization myself because I remember I mean, I remember all the details, but I'm not gonna get into the details, but there was a time in my life where someone, asked me if I thought I was lazy, and I didn't really realize how much it affected me,
yeah.
but now in my life, I feel like you could say to me, you could call me ugly, stupid, fat, I don't know, anything, like anything. You could call me anything. But if you think I'm lazy, if you have an impression of me that I am lazy or that I'm not, productive in some
Yeah.
way, it devastates me. It's like the
Yeah.
worst thing ever.
Yeah. So
And
that's you're
I
not
was
enough,
young. Yeah, I
right?
was very young when that happened.
For most of us, it's some version of not blank enough, right? I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not persevering enough. It's some version of not enough that is what's keeping us in that sort of spiral. And then there's what I call a double bind, where it's like you're pushing on both sides of it. So the one side is the total fear of being lazy, but the other side is the fear of being so active that I couldn't possibly keep it up. And I'm going to be so exhausted and so drained and so burnt out. So when you're pushing on both sides, the universe is saying yes to both. And that's the stuckness, right? So, like, I'm not wealthy enough is a really, most of us feel like, if like 10 million dropped out of the sky, I'd be good. I'd be so much happier if that would come to be. And so when we start making money, there's the feeling of, I haven't got it yet. I'm not quite there yet. So there's stress on that. That's like a negative feeling of, I'll be happy when. And then on the other side of it, when we start making all that money, it's like, holy shit, there are all these things that might happen once I have it. A, what do I do once I have it? Because now everything I wanted is true. B, everybody's going to want something from me. Are the people that I love still going to feel connected to me? Or are they going to think I'm a snob? Right? Like, am I going to be able to manage it and not blow it? So again, you're pushing on stress. So that's why you're not making more money. You're not making less money. You're just sort of stuck at that stage.
Mhm. Uh-huh.
And that's the double bind.
So is that so really what we're talking about is just it's a shift, it's a mindset shift, right?
Yeah.
It's learning to, and not that that's a simple thing, because these are beliefs that we've had, like you said, since we were little. So it seems to be that we have to actually trick our mind, or not trick our mind, but we have to have a mindset shift
Yeah. I
in
would call it
order
more
to
of
move forward with it.
a programming shift,
Okay.
right? Because
Okay.
mindset to me is like I work on my mindset. If I'm in a bad mood, I have tools that I can do to get me out of the negative mindset. But my beliefs are my vibration, and my vibration is what's creating my reality. So my programming about money, my programming about my enoughness, my soul self of I deserve all the things that I want to experience in this body in this lifetime because I deserve to be here, period, the end. I don't have to be anything enough. That belief and that program is what creates our actual reality. The mindset is like to me, it feels like the icing on the cake. It's heady and it's out there. And by the way, I understand that this work can feel very woo woo, and I get it. And I'm a skeptic as well. And I was when this was all happening. And I totally understand. So if anyone out there listening is kind of rolling your eyes, I get it. I totally get it. And the work works. Like,
I don't really, I mean, I'm sure that I'm sure that there are people out there that think it's a little woo woo, but I mean, I think that anybody who understands or has had an example of, a mind shift in their life, and, talking about the laws of attraction. I mean, that's something that I've been really interested in and kind of studied for a long time. So to me, none of this sounds out there and woo
good.
woo. It
Thank you.
is really interesting to me. And a lot of it, I mean, I feel like there are things that you're saying that are very relatable to what therapists do, to what, there's scientific belief behind, what you say to yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, and the way that that you deal with, um, what your mind says. There's science behind it now. I mean, maybe 20 years ago it was a little woo woo, but I feel
Right.
like people are out there studying this now, and I feel like there's proof.
Like normally after one session, people say to me, I just feel lighter. I feel like the weight on my shoulders has been lifted. I feel like the heaviness in my body has lifted. And then after two or three, they'll say like, I spent a weekend with my mom and we didn't fight, right? Like she was still annoying and she still said things that were hurtful and it hurt for a second, but I didn't need to engage. I didn't even care. I recovered so quickly. And to your point, I can't change the stressor, but we can change the way
Right.
you respond to the stress, right? So if you're not going to quit your job, if you're not going to stop talking to your mother in law, the only way that I see that we can be truly empowered is to change the way that we are responding to it. And that's at a vibrational level, that's at a programming level.
So talking about the way for so how for me it's not woo woo. I This is reminding me of a podcast that I listened to that was purely based in science. It's the Huberman podcast. Anyway, I listened to that, and he's a scientist. And I'm probably going to butcher the way that the study was done, but it basically talked about how your mindset and how you go into things really affects the outcome. And they had two groups of people, and one of them was given a lot of literature about how stress can be performance enhancing. And it was true. It was all true, information. They weren't lying to these people, but these people were given, this information and then put in stressful situations. And because they had that information in their head to think, well, stress can be performance enhancing. They were better at,
Yeah,
dealing with the stress of these, stressful situations. And then on the other side, people were given information, again, true, just the opposite side of the coin, because stress can be good and stress can be bad. And the other people were given the opposite information, how stress can be debilitating and it can be really hard to achieve your
sure.
goals if you're stressed. And then those people obviously did not do well in different trials, and they also had stress signals like, sweating and heart palpitations and, just elevated heart rate and all of
Yeah,
those, bad things that we associate with stress. And I mean, that's
yeah,
science.
yeah.
That's just like
Like those were their
science
beliefs.
and truth. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, it's out there. It's about the way that you approach it.
yeah,
And that's, I think, with anything in life, the way that you approach it is at least 50%
yeah.
of, what you get out of it.
Well, I think in our lives as kids, we're taught certain things, we believe them. We're taught to check certain boxes and then we will be happy, right? If you have a partner and a home and a good job and a family and you go on a couple of vacations every year and you have a lovely Christmas, then that equals happy life. And I think for most humans, it's not hitting the box, right? It's not working.
Mhm.
And then that in itself feels stressful. Like, what did I do wrong? I thought that if I did all these things, it would equal, and it's not. And now what? And that alone can be so stressful because the adult is not in the room. Like your little inner child is still running the show on how you feel. You're still going to feel not enough, even though you've collected and checked all these boxes and done all these things. So once our adult self can soothe that child, then that child can stop running some of those alarms. And then you can start enjoying the moment.
Well, I think that sometimes we're programmed to think that we want certain things
Yeah.
and maybe we don't.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes we're brought up to think that we want the house and and the two kids and the car and the,
Yeah.
whatever it is, whatever our parents drilled into us that we should want. And then we reach a certain age and we have those things. And it's like, you come to like a realization at some point, and it's like, why don't I don't want this? Like,
Yeah.
this is not what I want. And I want something else. And why am I crazy for wanting something else,
Yeah.
something else that's out there?
And I'm actually on the other side of that. So I didn't have kids because it just didn't happen for me. I wasn't in a relationship where I would have had kids. And growing up, it was when you have a husband and kids, when you have your own house. So I've really had to deal with the grief and really, what did I even want it in the first place? Or am I grieving
Hmm.
it because it just didn't happen? right? And I think most people get married and have kids without thinking about it. That's
True.
what we do. And it's hard, right? So I think now what's amazing is that because so many people are coming online with these kind of gifts and sharing them and talking about them more, the next generations are talking about it and they are thinking about it and it's not a given, hopefully.
I agree with that. I mean, I have a daughter who is 28, and I, just from my interactions like with her friends and things like that, I think that they are much more open to having alternative types of lifestyles,
Yeah.
and maybe, deciding that they want to travel and maybe not have family or have kids, or
Yeah.
stay single, and they're
Right.
not like worried about being married by the time they're 30, or
Right.
all of these other things. And I think it's great. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that they're starting to this generation is kind of starting to think about what they really want,
Yeah.
and they're not as apologetic about their feelings,
Totally.
and they're able to kind of advocate for themselves and say what they need and what they want.
Yeah.
And I don't think that my generation really felt that way
No.
or felt
I mean,
permission to do
even
that.
I feel like, the horror of I'm an old maid or and not that anyone in my world actually feels that or thinks that, but like
Right.
that was sort of the image I was given was like, if you're not picked by a certain guy by a certain age, you're no longer of use. And like, that's horrifying.
Yeah, like, what?
Like, we really bought into that crowd.
Right. And if
Yeah.
you said that to somebody, I feel like, a young person now, they would think you're they
Out of
they
your
wouldn't
mind.
believe it for a second. They would
Yeah.
think you were out
Out
of
of
your
your mind.
mind, for sure, for
Totally.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, that's so interesting, which is it's a good thing. It's a good
Thank
shift.
God.
It's definitely a good shift.
Yeah.
And I see that too in even the way that that generation is approaching their livelihood and their careers. I've seen a shift in people just saying, "Well, I'm not going to have that corporate job, and I'm not going to, take something that has, benefits, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna I'm
The
gonna just
smart
do this other
decision.
thing, this smart decision,
Yeah.
and I'm just
That was an
gonna do
air
this
quote
other
for those of
thing
you who are listening. Yeah.
and just, do what I want to do, or I'm going
Yeah.
to start this business, or I'm going to, and they believe that they can do it, and they do it. And it's just like it's crazy to me because when I was in my 20s, I was, I wasn't even thinking about that. I would
Sure.
never even believe that I could do that.
Yeah.
And I was out there and I was working hard and I was being treated poorly sometimes by people that I worked for or companies that I worked for. And I would never have stuck up for myself. I would
Yeah.
never have said anything because it was like, you just keep your head down and you do it, and you just prove yourself and prove yourself and prove yourself until you can't prove yourself anymore. And at some point, you get enough experience and you get enough confidence and you realize, okay, this is not okay. And I'm not going to do that anymore. But I think it's late, and for me, I think it was, pretty kind of late in life that I, had to say that to myself.
Yeah.
And when I was able to do that, things got way better. I mean, my career opened up and my life opened up, and I enjoyed what I was doing so much more when I was able to do that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want anybody to, wait until they're kind of late 30s to, even think about advocating for themselves.
Yeah. They're not.
Good for them.
They're not. Yeah.
Good for them. I did want to talk a little bit about, and I think we kind of touched on this, but I think a really big thing that people feel sometimes is that imposter syndrome
Yeah.
of it's kind of like the a bad case of limiting beliefs. It's like I've gotten here, I'm doing the thing, but I don't know, I don't believe that I have what it takes to do it. And I feel like that could be in your professional life. I feel like that's, if you're a CEO, you can feel that way. And
Oh, yeah.
I feel like you can feel that as a parent. I'm parenting this child and I don't know what I'm doing. Um, What are kind of some of the tools that you think people should think about when they're dealing with that?
So anytime you're starting to try to deconstruct your stress or sort of the stressor, one of the first things that we want to do is acknowledge what the fear is. And in order to do that, you've got to start paying attention to what the trigger is. And so you've got to know how you react when triggered, right? You've got to be able to notice what's happening in you physically and emotionally. So for most of us, like if you're in a meeting and everybody has to go around with a creative idea and are counting that there are 5 people ahead of you and you've got nothing and the walls are caving in and the sweat is beating in your hands and in your low back, you want to know, okay, my body just went into fight or flight as if the lion is chasing me. The lion is not chasing me. So first you've got to like calm yourself down, feel your feet, wiggle your feet in your shoes and feel where you are on the ground. And then it's really about asking yourself, what am I telling myself here? Like what's going to happen? Because most of us go from 0 to 100 in our head without even thinking the thought. So we go into, if I don't come up with the creative idea, they're all going to know I'm a fraud. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to lose my house. My children are going to be taken away. My wife is going to leave me. I'm going to be destitute on the side of the road. Right? Like we go that far without actually
Right.
thinking those thoughts. Your body is responding as if you're already homeless on the street. So it's about acknowledging and then reassuring, like be the adult in the room. Imagine that you're sitting at a table with your 7-year-old self. Like for most of us, we can picture our class picture or some photograph from a certain
Right.
age. So you want
Mhm.
to come up with a photo of yourself at that age. And then imagine you would parent that kid as if it were your own child or a niece and nephew or a friend's kid that you maybe have been around and really be able to talk them off the ledge. Like, look, if you completely flop this meeting or this session with somebody or whatever it's going to be okay. It's just one meeting. You've succeeded in other places. If you end up getting fired and this isn't the job for you, we're going to be okay. The universe always has your back. Right. And then you start kind of listing, slowly climbing back up through facts. So I only tell myself facts of, for me, my personal situation, I've never not been able to eat, right? I've always been able to pay my ComEd bill. And so that gets me a little bit higher up. I have a savings account that gets me a little higher up. And so I slowly start climbing my way until my brain is functioning again. And then there's an adult back in the room. So we're always kind of trying to get the adult back in charge instead of the child. And by the way, I work with a lot of CEOs and a lot of very uh like high up execs, from chairman of hospitals to actors to professional athletes to all of it. And they have all said to me, I'm terrified that someone's going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. Right.
Wow.
So it's
Yeah.
because for most of us, there's some point between the ages of 6ish and 9ish when we have a moment of going blank or not being able to come up with the answer when we're called on in class or having to go up to the chalkboard and not having the answer to write down and terrified everyone's going to start laughing. So there's always that moment of, I mean, I've had surgeons say to me, I'm not actually that smart. I'm like, what
Crazy.
are you saying to me? Like you could
Yeah.
list words that I don't even know exist.
Yeah.
So, and that to me, that's my not enoughness, right? That's I'm not smart enough because I couldn't take those kind of classes or I didn't do those kind of things. That's my thing. So it's really about knowing what the trigger is and then soothing ourselves when it comes up, right? So if you knew you had a fear of open water and you had to go on a boat party, you would be like practicing ways to find comfort in that water. And the same goes if you have imposter syndrome. There's also a thing that's happening a lot with women. Most of the women that I work with who are in some kind of a professional role have that thing of needing to walk this imaginary tightrope of I need to know exactly how stern or assertive to be. how soft to be, how not to be bitchy, but not to be a pushover. And it completely shifts based on who's in the room at any given moment and what we're talking about. So I have to always be taking everyone's temperature and constantly chameleoning myself to be a leader, but not too leadery, and compassionate, but not too compassionate. Right. And that, first of all, is maddening.
As you're talking about it, I just can feel instances in my own life that I have thought those exact same things. And
Yeah.
I feel that as women, we have to do that not only at work, but sometimes with our families and sometimes, like
Oh, yeah.
we, with our parents, with our, siblings. I feel like there is that kind of pull to think about in your head, okay, who am I right now in this moment? Like,
Yeah. Right.
if you're with, a parent that maybe you have a challenging relationship with, and you're like, you want to make sure that you're not coming across too strong or you're not saying
Yeah.
things that you are going to, trigger them. And yes, in professional life, I mean, that happens all the time.
But
And there's no right answer. There really isn't, because you're one person and you can't be everyone to everything to everyone.
totally. And there's no right answer, but the trigger of not doing it well enough, I'm
Hmm.
not leading strong enough, or I'm not being soft enough, or again, it goes back to the not enoughness. And once we delete that stuff out, once you clear that, the alarm doesn't have to go off. So you might be in that same conference room thinking, this guy thinks I'm an asshole right now, and I'm not, I'm just going to keep it moving. Like I'm not
Hmm.
altering myself for him. Right. Whereas before it happens so subconsciously, you don't even realize you did it
Right. And
until
I think
after.
once you do it, like I said, like I'm remembering just times in my career when that has happened to me. And as you of course age and you get more experience and you realize that, you know what, I do have the confidence and I do know what I'm doing. And once you are able to do it and say, I'm going to push those thoughts out of my head, and I'm going to lead in this way because this is who I am as a leader and this is how I lead, it does go away. It maybe doesn't go away, but the noises get softer. The questions in your head, the voices in your head kind of get a lot softer, and you don't necessarily hear them as, every time you're going into a room.
And this is where I would say the work that I'm doing is different than just changing your mindset, because once you've done this work, the thoughts don't come up in order to need to be pushed away. Right? Like
Love
that
that.
framework stops. It's like the groove in the record is so deep that once we move the needle over, it stops coming up at all. And that
Wow.
to me is like the most, right? Like someone can say to me, um, it's like if someone said to one of us, like we both have dark brown hair, you're so blonde. Like that would roll off our back and we'd be like, you nut job, whatever. Right. When
Right.
someone says to you, don't be lazy, with the same tone and the same inflection and the same lightheartedness. And inside, your blood is boiling, your back,
Right.
there's puddles of sweat dripping down your back, you're shaking, right? Imagine if I could give you the impact of you're so lazy as having the same response as you're so blonde, right?
Yeah,
And
that would
that's what the
be,
edits start to do. So
I
instead of
can't
it
even
being at
imagine
a
that.
10, right? Instead of it being at a 10 on the like, I'm going to kill somebody, it starts dialing back, right? So like my family can say, someone can say to me like, have you been on any great dates lately? Which they mean well, but I always want to say like, you would have heard about it. Right? Like if I were dating somebody, A, he'd be here with me, or you would have heard. So no, but thank you for pointing that out to me. Right? That's
Right.
like sassy, defensive. I feel shitty that I'm not dating anybody. But when I'm doing my work, it's like, no, no, but I'm having an amazing time. Right? Because
Yeah.
that's really the question, is like, are you happy? Are you content? Are you doing cool things? So if I can not let the trigger hit of, well, it's because you're not trying hard enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not putting yourself out there enough, you're whatever is the reason that I'm single. In my old brain, now I can get into, no, but can I tell you about these trips that I just went on? Or I just had a dinner with friends that was amazing and we laughed so hard our stomachs hurt. Or right, like without having to defend myself.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the change. That's the difference, is like the trigger doesn't hit, or it hits and then I'm like, come on, sweetie. You know better than that. Come on, Lizzie. And then I
Yeah.
bounce back and I'm okay.
I love that. I absolutely love that, and I can't even imagine that happening, so maybe we'll have to have
We're
some
gonna
more
have to give it a go.
conversations.
Yeah. Stay tuned for part two.
Absolutely. I wanna talk about one more thing, and that is, gratitude.
Yeah.
I feel this is something that has helped me tremendously in my life to have a gratitude practice, and I think that people do it in different ways, and I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts on it are. Do you do it? How
Oh
do you
yeah.
do it? Do you recommend?
Yep.
What
I
do you
love that you're
recommend?
asking that question. So Abraham Hicks, Esther had a recording about how she was talking about, instead of the word gratitude, use the word appreciate, because saying something like, I'm grateful for my clients implies that, like, I'm shocked by it, right? Or it's something that I wasn't deserving of that was bestowed upon me, versus I so appreciate all of my clients, where it's like, I know I deserve them. I know that they're meant for me. I know I'm creating impact. I appreciate the existence of them. I appreciate my health. I really appreciate having clean running water, versus I'm so grateful for it. Is like, I didn't have it and now I do. So that's the first thing that like really made a big shift for me. And I start every morning. Well, not start. I start with a meditation and then I go in and I, like, on a spiral notebook, I write a page of I appreciate, just like free writing. And I usually start with, like, I appreciate being able to sit here for 10 minutes with my coffee. And I just chugged a bottle of clean water to feed my body and I feel healthy and strong. And I'm writing all the things that I appreciate that are facts in that moment. And it, by the end of the page, usually by the beginning of the page, I'm like really stretching it. And by the end of the page, I can get into that connection to source. Like, I so appreciate knowing that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and I'm choosing to look for the good today. And I appreciate knowing that my thoughts impact my mood. And so I ask my guides and my source to help me only stay focused on good feeling thoughts. So, like, I work my way through. On my crummy days, on my bad mood days, I write, I appreciate having a refrigerator full of food. I appreciate having a closet full of clothes. I appreciate that anything that I want to eat, I can either have delivered or go and get. I appreciate I can turn lights up and down. I appreciate I can turn heat up and down, right? Like
Mhm.
the nitty gritty. So
Yeah.
I'm all about, like, you meet it where you are. And again, it's like climbing the ladder out. So throughout the day, I have moments throughout my day where, like, if I'm going for a walk, I stop and I look at the flowers because I love flowers. Or like, I make sure I'm paying attention to something that I appreciate all day throughout the day in order to get those little hits of abundance.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and I have tried to do that too in my life, and I definitely have a gratitude practice, but it makes sense what you're saying about appreciate, and it does there is a shift there
Yeah.
in the word.
Yeah.
When you shift the word, there really is a shift there, so I like
It's like
that. I'm
more
gonna
empowering to think I appreciate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like there's always things that we can appreciate in our lives, like, we could
Always.
be in a tailspin of, a lot of different things, but, we woke up that day the baseline. So
Yeah.
you're here. You woke up that day and you're not out on the street. You have a home, you have food, you have water, like those
Yeah.
things. So and then yeah, I love what you said about taking the time during the day to like actually literally smell the flowers because there are moments there are days when you feel like you didn't have a great day or you had a really, really shitty day.
Yeah.
And if you really try to be present, you'll realize that there were good things in your day, whatever that was. It might have been a text message from a friend, or, it might have been something that made you smile when you were driving your car, something that you saw on the street. Like, there's always something good in the day.
Uh-huh.
And I think that everybody should really try to see those things because it just makes you feel better. It makes you feel better, and it makes you remember that no day is all bad.
So, one of the things that I think is really important to stay focused on is everything that we say that we want it because we think we will feel better when we have it. So, again, going back to like attracts like, if you think you'll feel better, the goal is to feel good. So, you have to find a way to feel good now in order for those things to come into your 3D reality. So, I have like alarms that go off on my phone, they're on silent, but at certain times of the day, an alarm will go off that says, I always have more money than I need. I can't help but attract money into my life, which is a fact. And then another alarm will be, uh, it's safe to be safe. And another alarm will be like, what do you appreciate in this second? Because my brain doesn't automatically go to those things. So I'm always looking at my phone. So having something go off on my phone throughout the day, and then I have to switch them like every 4 days because I get used to it and I just hit snooze.
Yeah,
But
I love this.
it really
I love
helps.
this.
And if you're
I
on
think
the
that's
iPhone,
so great.
you can turn the alarm, like you can change, it'll just say alarm and you can change what it says. And
Right.
then you can turn the sound to none. So it just pops up on your phone. So even if you're in a meeting, you'll see it pop up and say, I always have more money than I need. What's funny is that sometimes people will grab my phone and be like, whose phone is this? What are you doing? And like some audiences, you don't really want seeing it, but you deal with the consequences. It's worth it.
That is hilarious,
Yeah.
but it's such a great way to have, like, affirmations
Yeah.
all day long and to
Yeah.
think about it, to your point, we're always on our phones.
Yeah.
So, you might forget to say it to yourself in the mirror in the morning, but if you can say it to yourself with your phone, that's genius. I love it.
Okay. I'm going to give you
I
one
think that's great.
practice that has changed things for me. That was the
Okay, great.
hardest thing to do.
Okay.
When you're brushing your teeth, like as you're toothpasting your toothbrush and getting ready to brush your teeth in the morning, before you do it, look in the mirror, eye to eye, like look in your eyeballs and out loud say 10 times, I love you. 10 out loud. I cringed so hard the first times I did it. And I was alone. No one's going to hear me do this. But I was like, this is so cheeseball. And then,
Yeah.
like, by the third or fourth one, I was like, "Oh, I do love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh, I love you." And saying it all the different ways. It's such a cool way to start your day.
Oh my
And
god, that is so great.
if you live with someone, like just laugh about it. Let yourself be cheesy together and just lean into it. But saying it to yourself in your eyes, isn't it fascinating that, like, I could say to you right now, Donna, I love you. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. This has been amazing.
Right.
My dog, I used to say it to her 8,000 times a day, but
Oh,
I
right. Of
can't say it
course.
to myself.
I That is so crazy, and I am going to do that. I am going to try it at the very least, and
Tell,
I'm gonna call you
tell
and
your
let you know
kids,
how it
tell
goes.
everybody. That's how you should start your day and end your day, but it has to be in your eyeballs in the mirror. And I get kind of giddy when I'm saying it. Like I like schoolgirl crush. It's a little trippy. Like I really kind of get into it.
It's so funny. I mean, look at us now even talking about doing it. Like, it just, it has an energy shift just talking about
It
doing it. So,
raises the vibration in a huge
I
way.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love you.
Thank you. I love
This
you
was
too.
so fun to talk to you about this stuff. And I don't want to keep you forever, but I could literally talk about this stuff forever. So we may have to do a part two
I'm
at
always
some
happy to jump
point.
back on. Always.
Well, I so appreciate you. Thank you so much. And if anybody that is listening wants to contact you, they can reach you at Instagram. I believe you have a TikTok, and it's LizziCutler.com is your website,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah. It's LIZZICUTLER. There's no E.
LIZZI.
And I'm new to TikTok. So please join me on TikTok and help me come up with content ideas of what you want to hear from me. Because I don't know
Well,
what
I
to
think you've
post.
been doing great. I'm
Thank you.
also new on TikTok, and it's not easy. Talking about looking in a mirror and talking to
Yeah.
yourself, that's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's very hard. But I think you're doing a great job, and
Thank
I
you.
do like
I
yours.
appreciate
So,
that. Thank you.
yes. So I already follow you. So make sure that you follow me, and
Yeah.
we'll see each other on
Yeah.
TikTok. Thank
All
you so
right,
much,
friends.
Lizzie.
Thank you, Donna.